7:30 on the East Coast, and polls are closing in West Virginia, in North Carolina, and in Ohio. If you are in line to vote in any of those places, you must be let in to vote. In the crucial swing state of Ohio, NBC is characterizing this race as too close to call. Again, Ohio, too close to call at this hour. In the state of North Carolina, which was won by President Obama in 2008, again, NBC is characterizing this race at this point as too close to call. And in the state of West Virginia, there is a projected winner, Mitt Romney, the projected winner in the state of West Virginia. At this point, with the polls that were closed in the 7 o'clock hour, not just closing right now, but that closed at 7 o'clock, we are still characterizing the Virginia presidential race as too close to call. In the state of Georgia, it is too early to call at this point. We do not yet have enough information out of Georgia to project an advantage for either candidate. Same goes for South Carolina. At this point, South Carolina still too early to call. When you add all of this up in terms of the electoral map, President Barack Obama with 3 electoral votes. The state that has been called for him thus far is the state of Vermont. And Mitt Romney with West Virginia, Kentucky, and Indiana in his column. That puts him well ahead with a very small number of states. Alex Wagner is tracking Senate and House races. A couple of crucial Senate races we're looking at from the states that just had their polls closed. Alex, what do you got?
Thanks, Rachel. We have a few updates to give you. In West Virginia, we have a projected winner. Joe Manchin, the incumbent, the Democrat, holds on to his seat. Not a huge surprise here, but we can say that Joe Manchin, the projected winner, is the projected winner at this hour. Let's take an overview of the upper chamber right now. At this hour, it remains unchanged. The Democrats with 31 seats. Independents have 1, and the Republicans have 37. Over to Ohio, the state we will be watching all evening. It is too close to call. Sherrod Brown, the incumbent, in a tight race with 35-year-old Ohio State Treasurer Josh Mandel. Again, too close to call in Ohio. Over to Virginia, much the same story with 2% of the votes in. Tim Kaine in a neck-and-neck race with George Allen. All that separates them at this hour is 11,911 votes. Over to Indiana, similar story with 10% of the vote in. Richard Murdoch in a very tight race with Joe Donnelly. What's interesting in Indiana is that libertarians are taking 6% of the vote in this race. You may recall that polls last week showed Richard Murdoch, losing to Joe Donnelly by 11 points. This has tightened up considerably. Given that, it will be interesting to see what the libertarian vote does to this race. And certainly how Mitt Romney does in that race may affect what happens down ballot. Back over to you, Rachel.
Alex, thank you very much. Again, just recapping there. Indiana Senate, too close to call. Virginia Senate, too close to call. Ohio Senate, too close to call. We do have a call in West Virginia, Joe Manchin winning in West Virginia. We've also had a Senate call, a not particularly suspenseful Senate call in the great state of Vermont, where the independent Bernie Sanders has been reelected. Too close to call in Ohio, too close to call in Virginia for the presidential race. That's obviously the big
the good news for Romney is still close to call, too close to call in Ohio, where he was behind, and good news for the president, he's still too close to call in North Carolina, and they had about a 4-point spread in both cases. So this is really right up in the air right now.
Too close to call in Ohio, North Carolina, and Virginia in terms of presidential race thus far. In terms of too early to call, that would be Georgia and South Carolina. Those are not states where there's a ton of suspense in terms of the polling, in terms of the way those things are likely to go. But with all the battlegrounds at this point, with no characterization of the race, with them all being too close, it seems like it's going to be an exciting night. Steve Schmidt, when you look at too close to call in the Ohio Senate race and in the Indiana Senate race and in the Virginia Senate race, does that seem like they're doing sort of better than you might thought?
No, it's very, very early. The polls just closed. I think that we're going to see this over and over again tonight. Unless you have a decisive victory, which you'll see in West Virginia, I think it's going to be tough to call it in the first 15 to 20 minutes. I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, looking at that Senate race, it's been interesting to watch in that Senate race in Ohio. Obviously, all this attention on Ohio, so much money being spent on Ohio in terms of the presidential race, but they still managed to find, what was it, $60-something million more to spend on that Senate race between Sherrod Brown and Josh Mandel.
Who would have believed that Sherrod Brown would have to fight this hard against this young Republican? I am stunned by this, right?
Who's an extremist? I mean,
I'm stunned by his vulnerability in this race.
The corporate money has gone into Ohio against Sherrod Brown because he's gone after Wall Streeters. I mean, he's gone after the insurance industry. I mean, he is the guy. He is really the modern day Ted Kennedy. I mean, he is the guy that is really the progressive hero right now.
We do have a call in a state that we had not previously called. NBC News can project that in the state of South Carolina, Mitt Romney is the winner, and that is 9 electoral votes for Mitt Romney. So at this point, that puts Mr. Romney with Indiana, South Carolina, Kentucky, and West Virginia all in his column. At this point, the only state that has been called for President Obama is Vermont. We're still waiting on Ohio, North Carolina, and Virginia. Those are all characterized as too close to call. Georgia's still too early to call at this hour. Tamron Hall has the latest from our exit polling from the state of Ohio. Tamron, nobody knows when we're going to get a result from Ohio. We're going to be focused on it as long as we possibly can, and then we're not going to know what to do with ourselves once we're told to stop paying attention to it. What do we know in terms of what was turning out voters in Ohio tonight?
Well, it's so interesting. Rachel, we've talked so much over these past weeks and even the year about the bailout, and it's no doubt about it that the bailout was popular, the auto bailout, that is, was popular in the Buckeye State. About 6 in 10 said they approve of the federal government's aid to the auto industry. You see there the specific number, 59%. Now, let's take a deeper look among those who approved of the auto bailout. I want you to see this. 75%, 3/4 of the vote there, well, they voted for President Obama. And it looks like the auto bailout may have helped him do better among white working class voters in Ohio than he did in other parts of the country. Again, take a look at these numbers in Ohio. Romney got 55% as opposed to President Obama's 43%, 12% difference. But when you compare that to the national number, 63%, 35%, 28-point advantage among white working class for Governor Romney. So you see the difference there with Ohio and the nation. We're going to keep an eye on that number because the auto bailout industry, Ed's talked so much about it, the rest of the panel as well. This could be a tipping point in the race in Ohio, specifically white working class. We'll see what happens there.
Tamron, that was stunning. Absolutely stunning in terms of the way that they
Yes.
shaved that margin down in that critical state.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Here's my question about the auto bailout and about its politics this year. What is Mitt Romney's position on the auto bailout? Was it a disaster that resulted in Jeep being sold to the Italians and shipping production to China, which isn't happening? Or was it a great idea that was his idea and it only worked because he was the one who proposed it?
Well,
I mean, what ultimately ended up being his stance on the auto bailout? If you're an Ohio voter standing in line right now, you still haven't gotten in, even though polls are closed, you're still in line and the auto bailout is the issue for you. What do you think Mitt Romney thinks about it?
Well, it was the double down that really hurt Mitt Romney. Instead of just going along with the narrative that, you know, I'm really glad these people are back to work. This shows that America can do great things. Say something positive about it without complimenting the president.
Yeah.
And I think he could have gotten out of it. Instead, he took a real obstinate attitude. The radio ad was far more aggressive than the TV ad, and he jeeped himself right into the corner, so to speak. Look, if it's the economy, if that's what this is all about, Ohio, you can look at that as a microcosm of how the country's going to go on the mindset of people. It's about the jobs. Their unemployment rate has gotten better. People are working again. We're manufacturing things. And that's another thing, is that the people in this country, I believe, want to make stuff. We know that there's a future in making stuff, and Ohio's making stuff. And President Obama got behind workers. He didn't send them over to China the way Mitt Romney did. So there were a number of dynamics that played into this story.
See, I think your question is the problem for Romney. If I'm online, I either think Romney had a brilliant idea, or I think that Romney was wrong. I think if I was a supporter of Romney, potential, I think he either had a great idea, or I think that Romney was against this and it was the wrong policy. But I know what Obama did.
Yeah.
And I think the strength that the president has in Ohio, which I think is going to make him victorious tonight, is his supporters know why they're coming out. There is all kinds of different scenarios on the Romney side of which message are you selling. And if I'm online tonight, you might have two Romney people online for two different reasons,
even if
about the same
issue. That's the thing that is amazing to me. And to see Rob Portman and John Kasich out as these incredibly powerful, high-profile Romney surrogates from Ohio, both saying, you know what, the bailout wasn't that great. Auto industry is not that great.
Right.
We don't have that many auto jobs. When the people of Ohio know differently, I think that was a strange strategic decision. We still do not know, though, whether it paid off, because Ohio is too close to call.
John Kasich could take a lesson from Chris Christie on that.
But this week, John Kasich had to say, no, Mitt Romney was wrong about saying these jobs are going to China. Our friend Norah O'Donnell interviewed him the other morning, and he very specifically said Mitt Romney is wrong about that.
So even if you don't care about the auto bailout, you now know that he told you a lie. Yeah. All right. Chuck Todd is with us in terms of looking at the latest. Chuck?
Well, we were going to talk about Ohio, and we ought to talk about the fact that Ohio is not one state. You know, the joke in Ohio is that it's 5 Ohios, and I want to show you a couple of ways to watch the returns in Ohio specifically tonight. Let me go to our 08 county map here, and what'll be interesting to see is a few things. In one part of Ohio here's coal country. Will some of that blue area that was Obama in 2008 get redder? That's been the assumption. Romney hopes to run up the score here. Columbus metro area, this is an area that Bush carried in 04, Obama carried it in 08, the media market. The blue area is Franklin County itself. But the entire metro, this is the fastest growing part of Ohio. While Ohio's shrinking in population overall, Columbus is growing. Hamilton County here, Cincinnati, also the biggest county that went Bush 04, Obama 08. And then this is Montgomery County. There's always a Montgomery County somewhere in the country. And I just point that out. But I couldn't, those numbers that Tamron was talking about white working class here. This is the auto belt right here, right? This is Toledo, over to Akron over here. I mean, we know that this is where the president was overperforming. But when we talk about the 5 Ohios, I think there's one that matters more than any. Yes, the president overperforming in the Toledo area and Akron is important, but let's not forget Cuyahoga. The president won Ohio by a little over 260,000 votes. Well, look at the margin that he got just out of Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland. He got 259,000. He basically, his entire margin of victory in Ohio 4 years ago was in Cuyahoga. And why do you think Mitt Romney went to Cleveland today? They're trying to shrink that margin tonight. They need to shrink it by a lot, frankly, to carry Ohio. I think by under 200,000 in order to carry Ohio. Ask Ted Strickland, when he didn't win re-election, it was because Cuyahoga did not come in big for Democrats in 2010. So that, to me, of all the 5 Ohios, that's the one Ohio I'm watching.
Chuck, we've paid so much attention to the dynamics around the auto bailout specifically in what you described as sort of the auto belt of Ohio. But what do we know about the dynamics in Democratic strongholds in places like Cuyahoga County and how enthusiastic those voters are this time around who went so strongly for Obama in 08?
Well, we know they moved a lot. We know that the president spent a lot of time working, particularly college campuses, and that was, no accident that he spent Monday in Columbus, Ohio State, college town, and no accident that Vice President Biden also went to Cleveland today to make sure this is a big African-American vote. This is very important when you put the margins here. But what's been fascinating to me about Ohio this whole time, Rachel, is that I think if it wasn't for the auto bailout, I think Ohio would be a state that the Obama campaign, because I can tell you this, 2 years ago, all I heard from David Plouffe and Jim Messina, the two guys running the Obama reelect, was we want to make sure we have a map that we can win without Ohio. That's what they were concerned about 2 years ago. Then the auto bailout, then Mitt Romney, and suddenly Ohio became a state that they thought not only could they win, that it was one of their most important states to their path to 270. And it's been fun. And why did they think that? Because Ohio's unlike other Obama states. Ohio is a shrinking population, an older population, and a whiter population. And normally in those states, that's where Democrats in general, the president in particular, had been doing weaker. He does better in a place like Virginia, a growing state, a more diverse state, and a younger state. And so to watch that dynamic with Ohio, it's going to be particularly galling to Republicans, I think, if they lose Ohio, because by the total demographic count, it should have been in their column tonight.
It's such an important point. I went back and checked my numbers about 3 times today when I realized I had written down that Obama won Virginia by more than he won Ohio in 2008. Right. I thought, that can't be wrong. That can't be right. But that's what it was. He won Virginia by 7 and Ohio by 5. Chuck, thank you very much. Appreciate it. About 15 minutes until polls close in Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, a little state you might have heard of called Florida, and 14 other states. This is MSNBC's continuing coverage of the 2012 election. This is the really good part. We'll be back with more after this.